Here we are close to the end of a long day. As you can see, I'm already sleeping awake over there in the corner. I know you are tired, but this one is worth your attention, and I can guarantee you this. We're proud to have Carlos Espinal, the partner of Seedcamp, here again at How to Web. He's been here over the past years. I think he's been at How to Web more times than I've been, and I've been quite a lot, for the record. Carlos has recently launched a book that's called The Fundraising Fieldguide, and this evening he's going to help us decipher the secrets of fundraising. Carlos, thank you once again for joining tonight and teach us how to fundraise.
Thank you. Cool. How many of you have seen this TV show called Everest? It's on the Discovery Channel. Anybody? There's a movie that just came out also about Everest. Anybody seen that? Okay. It's really, really crazy, isn't it? And I saw the movie, and then once I saw the movie, I actually got addicted to the TV show. The TV show is actually better than the movie, not because the movie doesn't resonate with you, but it's because it's the live story of these 8 guys trying to come up this mountain. And I couldn't help, but the entire time that I was watching this TV show, because there's 3 seasons, so I've seen season 1, I'm halfway through season 2 on my flight to Bucharest. I was watching a little bit of it, and I could not help but see the parallels between being a founder, fundraising, and climbing this mountain. I mean, everything from having to have people help you bring resources to base camp, everything from having to have multiple camps, so multiple series stages of investment, the kinds of conditions, the pain. Like some of these guys are saying that just going to the toilet makes them go out of breath. You know, when you've been working 2-3 weeks in a row without sleep, you know, running a company and having to deal with an employee who's being difficult is also just as painful and just as difficult. And so I want to talk a little bit about the book that I wrote in the context of Everest, just because I think it's a very, very good parallel. But before I do that, let me jump straight into who I am, what I do. My name is Carlos. I'm originally from Honduras, which is a country smaller than Romania in many ways, and definitely less industrialized than Romania. So I have a lot of sympathy for any claims that coming from a country like Latin America and Honduras is a difficult country to fundraise in. And I'm one of the 2 partners, managing partners of Seedcamp, which is based in the UK, but we're a global investor. And the URL for the book is fundraisingfieldguide.com. It's a free book. It is a donation-based book, so for all of you that are going to go now and download it and kill the Wi-Fi, please consider donating to one of the charities that are on the website. They are social entrepreneurship charities, and so you will help somebody. Now, what is Seedcamp? Seedcamp is a first round fund. What we're trying to do is provide founders. Can the founders in the room raise their hands? Okay, a few of you. And of those that are raising their hands, how many are actively fundraising at the moment? Okay, so a few of you. Now what I want to do is, I'm not going to obviously go through every chapter of the book. That would be both boring and also kind of defeat the purpose of you giving me more downloads, which is always fun, a vanity metric. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on some of the more compelling elements of the fundraising challenge, and then I'll leave it to you to go and explore the book in more detail. But in terms of what Seedcamp does, Seedcamp is this first round fund that allows founders that are kind of in your situation, that are looking for the first round of institutional funding, whether it be pre-seed or seed, to have access to the best network of mentors as well as investors around the world that can support you through that process. And we have a lot of that experience in building companies. We've been around since 2007. I personally have dealt with over 200 companies and their fundraisings and dealing with everything from founders breaking up and me having to be on the phone on Christmas Eve trying to keep them together, to divorces, to deaths, to all sorts of good news as well, like acquisitions. And that is the foundation upon which we built Seedcamp, which is to have that personalized touch. And one of the best things about being in Seedcamp is how much you can be close to other founders that are going through the same experience as you are. This is the team. We've grown. We originally started off with 3 people, and we've now grown to 10. And you know that we are legit because we got 2 Romanians on the team. we've got Joanna and Bianca, and they're definitely the powerhouses of our team. And you know, love the fact that I'm here in Romania, and they helped bring this together. In terms of our stats, we're obviously focusing on a very narrow segment of the companies. We're looking for companies that can be billion-dollar companies. We look for companies that are pre-product market fit. We look for companies that have some stage of development. We also look for companies that are not nearly at the stage where they're looking at Series A, but rather that we can help them find those right investors. And if you look at the stats that we have, some years we've actually managed to successfully fundraise the entire investments that we made that year. But by and large, we have a 91% fundraising rate, and that's pretty damn good. Not only that, this isn't coming from dumb capital, this is coming from the top investors around the world. Index, obviously in Europe, some of the names you might recognize, including Andreessen Horowitz in the Valley, and now the great thing is that we get to invest with these guys, some of their ideas at a very, very early stage. And that's the kind of investor base that we want to bring to your companies if you seek funding from us. Now, over the course of these years, I've seen tons of stories, as I mentioned earlier. I've seen lots of funny things happen, I've seen a lot of sad things happen, but I've seen a lot of the same questions come up over and over and over again, especially for the pre-seed and seed stages, and therefore I decided, hey, why don't I just put this together in a blog post? And those blog posts accumulated over 4 years, and then we invested in a company called ReadSeed, which is a self-publishing company, and I said, well, you know, if we're going to invest in a publishing company, I got to eat my own dog food. So I had to write this into a book. So I spent the last year in the weekends writing a book and then published it. And you know, it's there for you guys. And I hope that you enjoy it and you get a lot of benefit from it. But that's kind of how it was born. Now, part of what the book doesn't cover is the fact that not everyone's designed for the kind of investing that most VCs or institutional investors do. There's a lot of you that probably make a substantial amount of money just from fundraising from maybe a local angel for friends and family, then you become cash flow positive, and you have a perfectly good business. So fundraising isn't necessarily for everyone, or at least institutional fundraising isn't for everyone, as the odds are pretty much against you, not only in terms of the company being successful, but also in terms of getting successful capital. Just as a comparison, we were talking earlier about mountaineering and mountaineering Mount Everest. The people have a higher likelihood of climbing Mount Everest than a startup succeeding. Man, that's insane, right? And the people that do climb up and do come down from Everest, inevitably, many of them have all sorts of permanent damage. Some people lose their fingers, some people lose their toes, and you could argue that some founders probably do have some sort of damage, whether it be their family or through their finances or whatever. So it's not an easy thing. And I have a lot of empathy for the founders that are in the room. And so part of what I want to try to cover is some of the things, the lessons that have been learned from that process. So the first thing that matters when you speak to an investor that you will be judged on, and you might not even know that you're being judged on this, is your past experience and the people that you surround yourself with. A lot of people say, yes, it's all about the team, but actually what's actually very difficult for you to understand when an investor says that, what that actually means. So in some cases, I've had people come up to me and saying, hey, I'm a sole founder. Is that good or bad? Or, for example, I don't really know how to code, or I don't have an in-house developer and I'm outsourcing. You need to think about this not so much as whether something is possible, but whether something has a high probability of success. In this TV show, Everest, that I mentioned earlier, there are these two guys who have climbed together for every mountain range in Europe. And they decided to climb Mount Everest without oxygen and with no Sherpa support. Inevitably, they got lost and they died. Why? Because, well, they didn't have the right level of support. They didn't have the right experience. They didn't have in-house development, if you will, right? And so a lot of the best expeditions have all this together, and investors are looking for that kind of complete team. They're looking for you to have the credibility to be able to get your company from where it is today to the next phase. So investors are always analyzing you vis-a-vis the next best thing. The next one is context matters. This is something that is potentially more relevant for you here in Romania than, let's say, if we were talking about this in the United States. I was over at Max Kelly's. Is Max in the room by any chance from Techstars? He mentioned an interesting stat, which I anecdotally knew, but it was great to hear in terms of numbers, that it takes 50% longer to raise capital in the EU. And that's true from like what I get the feeling from. It means that the odds are stacked against you just by the nature that you're here. And that just means that you need to spend more time fundraising, you need to talk to more investors, and that means you need to focus more on all the elements of your business so that they are crisp, you sound great on stage, you can answer all the questions, you have a well-executed go-to-market strategy, because the bar is that much higher. When you get over the hard part, then the US investors get interested. The hard part being those early stages where you're trying to get the level of traction that is necessary for investors to get interested in you. There's an article that came out recently, I think I tweeted about it, so maybe you can find it in my Twitter feed, and it's about, it's a VC in the Valley saying how much VCs now are parking, making decisions unless you have very amazing metrics. And this is an unfortunate reality of the current day that we live in. And whether that's because the market has had too many companies raise funding, or whether we're in a bubble, I don't know. But the point is, definitely the bar is going up, and you need to be aware of where you are in Romania. You have pros and cons. Here, you have the ability to find some amazing technical talent, and it's going to be at a good value versus a lot of the US-based founders who have more challenges finding good developers and not having them be poached by the likes of Twitter and Dropbox and all that. So know the context you're operating in and leverage the best parts of it. The other thing is that don't necessarily go for underfunding. One of the challenges I think I've seen, I had meetings today, one-on-ones with some of the companies, and some companies came up to me asking, or fundraising for very small amounts of capital. And the problem is, when you raise too little capital, it's the same thing as trying to get to base camp with very little food or very little supplies, or trying to climb Mount Everest with no oxygen. The problem is that you cannot get far enough to impress the very investors that a second ago I told you are now waiting further and further to see how you're getting along. So be careful not to underfund your company. Make sure that you understand how much money you need. Usually it's about 12 to 18 months of runway before you go out and start talking to investors, because otherwise you're going to really run into problems in showing that you have any kinds of achievements that are worth the next stage of financing. And as I mentioned earlier, you have to plan for the fact that there's going to be multiple camps. You know, there's base camp, camp 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's going to be pre-seed, seed, Series A, and each one has different metrics and different dilution levels. And you need to start thinking about what that looks like, not both just in terms of what the Romanian venture or the Romanian angel scene is willing to give you, but in terms of globally, what people are willing to give. If you need to fundraise, for example, in the UK, because that's the only place you're going to be able to get the kind of money you need, you either make a decision that I am going to pick up and I'm going to go fundraise in the UK because that's my only chance to make this business mean anything, or maybe consider doing something different. Because you're going to have to make these kinds of difficult decisions. You do not want to approach this under-resourced. Once you decide that this is something you want to do, you definitely want to find the right people to do this with. The difference is huge. Think about your investors as people that are your partners in this journey. You can easily end up taking money from somebody who is the only person who's giving you money, or maybe one or two people who has a slightly better deal than the other guy. But at the end of the day, it's a huge problem on your board and who creates all sorts of fractures and does not open up any doors for you in your later stages of financing. And I've seen this in several companies. On the flip side, when you have an amazing investor, even if they don't necessarily bring in the best in terms of money, they might not be the richest in some cases, they can open doors, they can facilitate introductions, they can give you some great feedback. So be very selective, be as selective as you would be for an employee. But these guys are the ones that are going to make you have a higher likelihood of success, and in some cases will open the brand of their network so that even just by association, you can have an easier time fundraising for your next round. Now, this is where it gets really funny. Let's say you've done all those other things that I've mentioned. You thought about where you are contextually. You thought about how much money you need. You thought about which people you want to target. You've thought all these things through. Now, this is where it gets fun. This is where you go and you meet tons of investors, right? This is where you create a series of meetings that you're going to go take, and you're going to get rejections. And this is why I say fundraising is like dating. Why? Because we've all dated. I'd be surprised if anybody in this room has not dated. Most of the people that go on a date know that some can be absolutely painful, some can be a lot of fun, and then they fizzle out after 2 days or 3 dates. right? All sorts of crazy things can happen. Sometimes you have some people that are wacky, some people waste your time, some people you feel like they owe you money. All those kinds of things can happen, and you need to just get up, learn what you need to learn, and move on. One of our companies got rejected 86 times before they got a yes. 86 times. You know what it feels like to get a no 86 times? I mean, that's got to be like a, you know, if I had gotten 86 rejections in a speed dating event, seriously, I don't know what I would do. It's got to be the worst feeling ever. But instead of feeling down, every single time he methodically wrote down, okay, what could I have done better? What was my pitch? What was the questions I got asked? What are the things that I could potentially get asked again? Am I asking for too little? Am I asking for too much? And each one of those things led to the moment that he did get a yes. And ironically, when he did get a yes, it was after just 15 minutes of conversation. Now, what we don't know is whether his series of questions and answers in those 15 minutes was so polished that if he had not gone through those 86 no's, he would have never been able to effectively convince this guy in 15 minutes. So this is why you want to think about this as an iterative process, no matter how many rejections you get. Run the whole thing like a process, start to finish. Don't necessarily get bogged down by too many rejections. Start setting milestones. Those milestones are going to be foundation for your fundraising. Those milestones are either my product development milestones, my hiring milestones, my how many people I want to talk to by milestones. All these things, you want to build them out as milestones. You're going to map out your cash needs for each one of those milestones. You're going to come up with about a 12 to 18 month runway on these milestones, and that's what you're going to go put them together into a set of materials, and then you're going to start working on your storytelling to then go out and go dating. So a little bit about storytelling. Before you, as I mentioned earlier, traction is a huge thing. But if you don't have traction, then what? Well, this is where it comes back to your ability to tell a story. This is where it comes back to your ability to create a fear of missing out. Does everybody know the word FOMO? Okay, FOMO is when you can make somebody feel like, in spite of the fact that they're in an awesome party, there's an awesome party that's over there that's awesomer than the one you're in, right? We've all felt it. Actually, we probably feel it tonight. You know, we'll all be at some party wondering if there's another party that we should be at. But the same thing happens with investors. You want to make sure your investors are thinking, holy shit, if I'm not part of this investment round, if I'm not part of this company's lifestyle, I'm not going to be able to ever see the success of this company ever again. And that's only going to be accomplished if you're an amazing storyteller. If you can convince them that there's going to be a radical change in how people are going to be using your product or how are going to be adapting it because of the government's initiatives on something. I'm going to pick on somebody in the audience. I know the scooter guys are here. You probably have, who's tried the scooter in the hallway? It's pretty awesome, right? Like, it looks kind of dorky from the outset, but then when you get on, it's a lot of fun, right? And one of the challenges with something like that is that you need to be able to communicate to the investor, hey, look, this is going to be how people are transporting the future. And that investor, on the flip side, he's probably got a memory of Dean Kamen pitching the Segway and thinking, that didn't work. That seemed like it was going to work, but it didn't work. Why? Because fill in the blank number of reasons, right? So the power of a founder on a company that has yet to sell anything is going to be entirely on their ability to convince the investors that they're going to miss out on the next big thing, where I need to be able to be convinced that in 10 years, either everyone's going to be in a robotic Uber, which we all know is going to happen, we're going to be driven around by robots, or we're going to be driving our own sort of luxury Teslas, or in one of these vehicles that's the next generation. And those are the three vehicles. There's nothing else going to be. And if you can convince me of that, then okay, then that starts sounding like a billion-dollar business, not like a hobby toy, right? And that's the challenge. Now, once you've done that, once you've come up with this narrative, once you've come up with this idea, you've polished your pitch, you've created everything that you need to go and tell this compelling story, including your prototype, you then create an investor pipeline. This investor pipeline is going to be all the people that you want to have a connection with. These are all the people that are relevant to you. Make sure that you find people that are relevant for you. I think the worst mistake you can make is, I mean, think about it from a dating perspective. Let's say you're, I don't know, 30, you're not going to meet, well, some people might have a preference for people that are 20 years younger or 20 years older, but generally speaking, you're going to be wanting to meet people that are roughly in the age range that you find appropriate. You're going to probably want to have some shared interests, right? And just like in dating, you're going to want to do the same thing when it comes to investors. have your investors, the people that you have in your investor pipeline, have they invested in seed stage before or Series A before? What are the typical investment amounts that they've written? Do they have any competitors in the space that you are approaching them on? So in other words, have they invested in one of your competitors? For example, are they even active? In some cases, these investors, some investors have not made investments in over a year. It means that their fund doesn't have any money yet. So you need to go through this list of investors and really do your homework before you start approaching them. And once you do that, also be keenly aware of the competition, the fundraising cycles, and the market. So for example, 42% of startups fail because of lack of market need. This is effectively when they say that you have no traction, and why investors are waiting longer and longer is because there is no market need that you've demonstrated. Why am I going to invest, right? And another 19% feel that they've been outcompeted. So again, a big problem. If you cannot articulate, and I've met many founders where I'm speaking to them, I said, have you heard of this company? Have you heard of that company? And I hadn't heard of them. And I know that some companies don't yet surface to the top in terms of the competitive landscape. You should still know them. You should still be able to have a compelling reason why you're better than them, right? Because otherwise, you might find yourself out of an opportunity to raise money because these guys have raised money before you. Just so you know, the fundraising cycle excludes a couple of months. For example, investors usually shut down in December and in August. Why? Because that's the holiday seasons. So that means if you didn't raise money by, let's say, July, you're going to have to wait to get money by October because they're probably going to have a meeting again in September, and then late September they might make an investment. Same thing happens towards the end of the year. Like if the deal doesn't get done by December 12th or 15th, everybody goes on holiday, and then it gets wrapped up into January. So you want to think about these things as you're fundraising, as you're having conversations, and make sure that you raise enough money in your current round so that the next round you don't get caught in that situation. And prepare yourself for this journey. Make sure that you read the right books. Of course, I'm going to pimp mine out. Read it. There's Venture Deals by Brad Feld. There is a few others, obviously 0 to 1, and Ben Horst's book as well. These are all great books that can help you sort of get into the mindset. Maybe watch the Everest TV show like I did. It's actually quite inspirational to see these people go through these things. There's great blogs. Union Square Ventures' blog, Fred Wilson. And read term sheets. Read what are the deals that are out there. Look at the statistics of fundraising valuations available on AngelList and others, other places. This will give you good metrics so that when you go out fundraising, you have the right mindset around what is good, what isn't, so that you are not put on a spot where you cannot adapt quickly. And I think this, as I said earlier, as a process. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Whenever you get a rejection, why did I get this rejection? What questions did they ask? What could I have done better? And it's great if you have 2 people in the room, because at least one person can take those notes and be like, okay, I should have done this better, I should have done that better, right? If you like what I've shared with you, and you'd like to learn more about what we do, feel free to get in touch. Seedcamp.com. And if you want to learn more about some of the technical elements of the fundraising process, which include cap tables, managing the legal process, creating your financials, how to talk to investors, other components of your materials you need to create, those are all things I cover in the book, and I would love for you guys to download it. I would sign it digitally if I could, but I didn't bring any physical copies. And with that, thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Any questions? One over there.
The ideas from your book could be applied inside an enterprise?
So I guess the question is like the ideas in the book, could they be applied to within an enterprise? I think my gut feeling is no, not necessarily. But I mean, I think that the concepts of iterative storytelling, iterative proposals could be applied to internal projects. So I think those elements of it could. I mean, there's some very technical components in the book that have to do specifically with startup term sheets and startup related things. You probably have to cut those out. But if you think about most internal enterprise projects, they start off with somebody having an idea and wanting to then pitch it to like the powers that be, and then putting that together in a narrative such that you get approvals and you get a budget for it. So in those elements, I would say, yeah, perhaps you could use some of those components. Yeah. Yeah.
The question was about equity crowdfunding.
Yeah, so equity crowdfunding is actually one of those things that will increasingly become relevant, and I estimate within the next 5 years, a huge component of every early stage round will include some form of crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, I think, is still in the process of maturing, but for the most part, it's increasingly accepted, and the crowdfunding platforms like Seeders of the world are increasingly creating a mechanism that makes it equal for other people to participate at the same time. So I think that this negative stigma that crowdfunding had originally, I think, is definitely declining, and it's not nearly what it was, and is an increasingly viable way for early stage companies to raise money, especially companies that have cash needs that are very easy to be financed from their B2C proposition. You know, like the more that a customer or the more that somebody can fall in love with that idea because it makes sense to them in their personal life, the easier it is to crowdfund. I think B2B enterprise solutions will probably struggle a little bit more because it's a little bit more of an abstract thing.
Any other question? So, thank you very much.
Yeah, question, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I do have some hard copies, but I've reserved them mostly for Seedcamp companies. So if you become a Seedcamp company, then you'll get one for free. The reason why I haven't printed them out is because I wanted to make sure that all the money that I put into it would go to the charities, and I would have to upfront some printing costs. So I said, let's put it on ebook and then have you guys download. I might consider making it print. Undecided. Cool.
Do we still have any other questions?
All right.
Gabi, over there. Go ahead.
I think it's beer time now.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Indeed, it's beer time.